stories and events that matter to you.
This one is out of range of legality and legitimacy.
Within the context of offering alternative policies and alternative opinion and criticizing them, we are doing the much. More can be done.
The Dialogue on Dynasty 89.9 FM, 8 a.m. every weekday. The Dialogue on Dynasty.
Yeah, welcome back. On the Dialogue today, we take a broad look at Nigeria's energy industry, discussing the essential utilities that have become very scarce very lately, the perennial issue of petrol scarcity, and the very essential need of gas in the electricity industry. This morning, I'm joined by an energy analyst and consultant with very broad years of experience in the energy space. I'm talking about Jide Pratt, the Chief Operating Officer at Adeoya, Nigeria, and Country Manager with Trade Grid. He will be joining us very shortly to discuss some matters in the energy industry this morning. Jide Pratt will be with us very shortly on the program. The Petroleum Industry Act and a few other adjoining questions and recent events in the energy market in Nigeria. These are the things that we will be looking at very shortly on the Dialogue this morning. And of course, there will be opportunity for you to also be a part of the program. Right now, Jide Pratt, Chief Operating Officer, Adeoya, Nigeria, is on the line. Good morning to you, Jide.
Good morning, Mr. Gboyega. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining the Dialogue on Dynasty.
Nice. Thank you for talking to me.
So let's begin with some education about what has been going on in the petroleum market recently, especially with the scarcities and everything. But we need something like a timeline and a breakdown first to set this conversation. What has been happening in the last couple of years in the energy industry that led us to this place in your breakdown?
Okay, thanks for talking to me again, Mr. Gboyega. I think to start back, we need to go back just a bit further to when did we get to oil and where did we start? Oftentimes you hear it's a blessing and a curse, depending on how you deal with it. I'd like to use that phrase. So look at it that when we started from Oloibiri, that was the first commercial oil field in maybe about 1956. But what now happened after that was that companies like Shell, companies like Chevron, companies like Ajip, I mean, they all came in, and when we found out that we had oil at a commercial quantity, I think a few mistakes started. Very quickly, the NNPC developed to be the company that would refine petrochemicals for Nigeria. I tell people this a lot. Crude oil is a commodity, but you never drive into a retail outlet to buy crude oil. You never use crude oil to cook at home. So what the retail space does is that from the upstream where we extract oil, it has to be refined. Once it's refined into what you call distillates, intermediate products, and then other heavier things like bitumen, LPFO, fuel oil. But the point is that once that happens, you give value to the end market, which is the retail space.
So there's a cost, there's a production cost.
Absolutely. Without a certain, there's a production cost. But let's keep going. What it now means is that every time you have crude oil as a barrel as a country, if you have to take out that crude oil to another country to go and refine it for you and then bring it back in as finished product, you have gone ahead to spend money twice on freight. So it means that you're going to load it out on a vessel and bring it back in.
Back and forth.
Go back and forth. As the years went on, refining capacity in Nigeria started to decline. So what it meant was that at a certain stage, we were no longer able to refine our own crude oil into petroleum products for local use. So you would have had some phrases like the DSDP. That became what you call direct sale, direct purchase. And it was NNPC that came about with that idea that, look, we don't have refining capacity anymore. So what has happened is that we're going to have to give our crude to countries that can refine for us and then bring it back in as finished product. A lot of conversations around how this was managed. But don't also forget that as all this happened, in sometime around 2008, I think the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan administration said that, look, let us rework the petroleum industry's bill to become an act and move away from the Energy Act that we've been using for donkey years. So that came about that, look, what we're going to do is try and draw up how the oil sector should be organized. What are the physical measures? What are the technical measures? What are the community issues that we need to deal with? So if we enact a law that guides both the upstream and the downstream, then it will give us a better, let me say, footing to be able to build on. Sadly, that took us all of 14 to 15 years before the bill became an act.
Is that what you call unbundling? If we want to solve a problem, you can expand it. Is that what we're trying to do?
So let's look at it that first we're trying to create the laws that should guide it so that anybody coming into that sector understands the regulatory framework. That is what it was. One of the offshoots of that was that NNPC as an entity should now become a limited liability company. That was an offshoot of the PIA. However, it also means that in that you are able to drive the NNPC Limited as a private concern. In my opinion, that hasn't happened. Why do I say it hasn't happened? While they've changed the buying name to become a limited, the shares are still owned by the government and the Federal Ministry of Finance. So what it does mean is that they're still going to take investment decisions while you have a management team. It's different if you were working for a private company and corporate governance levels are the highest. So when you unbundle an organization, what you're trying to do is you're trying to break it down into smaller functional subsidiaries. So you have an NNPC Retail, standalone. You have an NNPC itself, Limited, which would deal with our upstream crude. But what the PIA did is that it now separated the regulations of that industry into two. So you have the NMDPRA, which used to be DPR, and they manage, let me say, midstream and downstream. You have the NUPRC, which Mr. Komfolafe runs, and that manages upstream. We want to buy crude, you want to get crude oil licenses, and so on and so forth. As time went on, you found out that people started to get licenses to be able to import petroleum products. It's important to add that this the PIA, ideally, that should have fizzled out, because what you are saying is that we're fully deregulated. So you add your pricing. That hasn't happened because the government is still intervening at different levels. If there's also an issue there where transporters say, look, I'm not going to load till you pay me a certain amount, or the roads are bad, so a journey of 2 days is going to take me 4 days. Let's say there's insecurity around some areas, which, to be fair, seems to have been reducing. Those delays could also back up and cause another supply gap.
So let me just to cut in. Let me just cut in here. The very recent scarcity that we have seen in the last 5 days to 1 week was caused by a bunch of issues. But I want to pinpoint which one is chief, because we have been having, petroleum importation, even though it's at high prices with the removal of subsidy in May last year. But why did this come very hard this time? Why did it get to a point? Where was that gap in particular? Of course, I think you mentioned the NNPCL as the sole supplier would be responsible for this in some way, but particularly where did that small gap come, maybe small or big, that led to this major nationwide crisis, so to speak?
I would say, and I mean, while the NNPC termed it what they call the technical issue, top of my mind, there are two reasons. Either you couldn't pay suppliers as and when and they held back, or the issues with payments being owed to transportation companies. I personally believe it's a mix of both. And that's why you now hear that we have 300 million coming. We have 14 vessels, 15 vessels coming. That's fine. But don't forget, like we said, if there's a gap in this flow, what will happen is that things will be held back. Yes. Personally, I think it must have been vessels that were reduced, maybe payments, maybe weather. And at the same time, I also believe they haven't dealt with the issues of paying freight claims. To a lot of transporters. I believe it's a mix of the two.
Now, going forward, and I want to piggyback on PIA. The implementation, PIA was enacted or launched in 2021, and we're 3 years in, and it feels like we haven't seen a lot of transformation in the petroleum industry. It's happening slowly, but can it be faster? Because the PIA took almost 14 to 20 years, like you said, to come to life. And then again, 3 years on, we don't seem to be able to implement. Is it the same bureaucratic problems or there is more?
So let's take it that it's a lot of bureaucracy. A law in itself is not perfect. Because what will happen is that you continue to iterate, you continue to, further development, you continue to edit it, you continue to check it. But I believe that the implementation of the Petroleum Industries Act was stalled. There were some certain things that were supposed to be done, and let's stick to downstream. One of the things that the PIA said is that by effluxion, once NNPC becomes a, private company, we would be fully deregulated. So if we're fully deregulated, it will mean that things like landing costs will not be solely on NNPC. Now, like you rightly said, the PIA became an act in 2021. But in 2024, the NNPC is still the sole importer of PMS.
There's a disconnect.
So that begs, not a disconnect. I won't use the word disconnect.
Okay.
And you must also look at it that the government of Nigeria knows that economy-wise, we're not where we need to be.
Yes.
So when the president said subsidy was gone, in earnest, it was gone. But as crude oil prices began to go up, as exchange rates began to increase, it meant that the landed cost of every liter of PMS was higher.
Yeah.
So they had a decision to make. Do we let the market take it? Or do we, intervene? That seems to be the word nowadays.
Yes.
So I think they did intervene. And when they did, it meant that the PIA that had stated categorically that other companies when they landed their products, NNPC, who was the market leader and still is, didn't adjust prices to what we'll call landed cost basis. So it meant that someone who's brought in 12 million, 15 million, 30 million liters of fuel is not able to sell that product at a profit because they're not entitled to a margin based on subsidy. And it also means that the market price did not move to entertain those landed costs.
So it's not really a free market.
So it isn't a free market. So you see, back to the PIA, while the PIA had said in earnest, this is what will happen, those things didn't happen. NNPC was supposed to be a limited liability company. And when you look at a limited liability company, we are talking about things like shareholders must be able to buy NNPC shares. The board composition, ideally, do you want 100% still with the government? For me personally, no.
No, it has
So
to be
if those things have
shareholders.
not happened, there has to be shareholders. If those things have not happened, contrary to what the PIA has said, it hasn't happened. So we're still saying we've not been able to implement because certain conditions that were set were not met. You look at things like upstream, where people were supposed to be able to, how will I put it, within 18 months, the dynamics should have changed. But by 18 months, some people didn't even have approvals to convert, to start lifting crude, for instance, where they had crude oil licenses. What has the government tried to do about that? You find out that Executive Order 40, which the president signed about a month ago, it tries to deal with the fiscal incentives around non-associated gas. So what are we trying to say? If I went to drill somewhere, when I'm looking for oil, gas will come up. That's associated gas. So what it means is that I can sell my gas,
Because you
or I
own
can
that
sell
block.
proceeds from my oil. I own that block. So I have proceeds to develop the gas. However, you have places where you have spots of gas finds where drilling is not taking place. So you need to be able to create an incentive, maybe in terms of fiscal tax reforms, waivers, I mean, for a period of time, so that people that invest there can recoup some money. Now, the gas pricing was also changed. So, I mean, it's a great way to move. You also look at things like communities. You look at things like how long does it take for a contract? In Nigeria, it was taking us 36 to 48 months to finish contracting cycles.
And that's a long,
So one of the
long
things
time.
they're saying is that's a long time. The president's executive order is trying to push that to 6 months. Look at the value of the contract. Before that, I think it was 1 million or 500,000, if my memory serves me right. Every time you needed to do something worth 500 to 1 million, you needed to go and start your approval process again. So what they've done in the executive order is move that to 10 million. So that you find out that 10 million, 3 years, and then you can apply for another 2 years. So what that means in earnest is that you're trying to shorten the cycle and at the same time prevent people having to come back for low thresholds.
So
that is trying to address those things. But don't forget, it's taking over 18 months to get there. So I think those are some of the things.
There's some hope ahead. There's some hope on the horizon. Sorry for that.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So you're listening to, sorry to cut in, you're listening to the dialogue on Dynasty 89.9 FM, or if you want to be a part of the program, the phone lines are open. We can take your calls 091-5598-9999 if you have a question for my guest or you have a contribution. And now let's get to gas. You already touched on gas, but I want to link gas to electricity and the recent policy we're seeing in electricity. Again, the energy sector is so interwoven that one thing leads to another, and then we'll get to renewables later. You've worked in the gas space for a long time, and tell me how important gas is, and this is some form of education now, how important gas is for the electricity market.
Okay, so let's talk about gas as a function of, or let's talk about electricity market as a function of what propels it. You have hydro, which will deal with water. You have thermal. And then, of course, we have renewables. Let's leave nuclear out. When you look at thermal energy, the question is this: what do we use as a propellant to move the turbines? Most of these turbines are gas turbines. So you need to feed in gas to be able to propel your turbines to generate electricity. Now, this is the issue. We sit on about 200 trillion scoff of gas as a country. But that is what we have in terms of reserves. How much have we been able to convert to use? Not enough. That's why you have the gas outages. There's not enough power. So it means that as a country, we've not been able to harness the potential of the gas that we sit on. I don't know if you've heard this before, but some people say that Nigeria is more of a gas nation than an oil nation.
Yes, I've heard it. One of the biggest
Now,
reserves.
absolutely. But the point is that what do you do with your reserves if they're just reserves? Then the question is nothing. The gas finds are not all congregated in one place. They're over pockets of different places, which is what we've talked about in non-associated gas and one of the things that the president's executive order is trying to do. But you see that until we find ways to, while we're reducing flaring, is one thing. But why were we flaring? People were flaring because of two reasons. If they couldn't find the commercial, commercial bankability to pipe that gas that they were flaring and earn revenue on it, then it would have been difficult for them to do that. So that means it was cheaper to pay flaring fines than to go ahead and actually pipe gas. So that's number one. Number two, some of the incentives we've talked again about the executive order 40 is that it's now giving fiscal incentives to actually want to develop that gas, to extract that gas. Now, if this had happened, imagine this had happened 10 years ago, then what it has meant is that we have more gas available for the generating companies. So that's number one. The gas will be transmitted. That's number two. Now, at the disco level, two things have not happened over the last 10 years that should have. Number one is that for them to increase capacity, it must mean that they're also commercially bankable in terms of rates. And that wasn't so. Before we got into this bandit, which I term banditry, you had not enough power being generated and not enough revenue being collected. How do you assure revenue in downstream? Is metering. So what I'm still saying is that imagine if we had done this 10 years ago, there would have been better data to say this is where power is going to, this is how much you're earning. That way, you're able to invest more into it. So the government decided that, you know what, let's ban this thing. If we ban this thing and take it to what we call a band A, then what would happen is that automatically those people in that band A will take the brunt of that costing. The lacuna for me is still that some of them still do not have the required power that they're paying so much for. And that for me is why I call it banditry. So you see, if you look at that whole value chain, it got to a stage where when the Gencos sell power to, let me say, NBET, which is government, to transmission, government holds back some of that money and pays them some. So if you heard, there were things like legacy payments that were due. So for me to invest, it means that I must have cleared my legacy payments. The assumption is that my revenue that is coming in will give me some capex spend and some opex spend. But if it is reduced or if it is held back and I'm paid, let's say I'm paid 60%, then there's a 40% gap that I have to go and borrow for, right? But that comes at an extra cost. So the issues around power have been based on, number one, can we charge 1 kilowatt hour based on what the unit cost should be? And the answer has been no. Is it available? No. Don't forget that we're still getting to distribute cuts. It's not. So, I mean, I won't use the word reasonable, but for me, it's not right. Reasonable could be here or there because there are different perspectives to this thing. I don't envy the people who have to run the sector, but this is the point. Up NEPA is a 50-year-old problem. And as a country, we haven't solved it enough. Some of the things we're doing now should be 10 to 15 years old. So that's on the one hand. But the second part now is that what we're doing now, if it's the instigator, then we have to have measurable indices to be able to look at it. That look, in 1 year, this is how much we've moved to in terms of installed generated capacity.
So Mr.
Gas has to keep,
sorry to just butt in because of time. I want to connect the disco. So there is the Genco you were at an event hosted by the Business Day recently, and the energy advisor to the president emphasized on this Band A thing, Ms. Olu Verheyen, saying that we still have to fix the liquidity matter. So I'm seeing that there is a problem with the discos, which we want to focus on. There's capital somewhere around the world, even within Nigeria, but nobody seems to want to get into the grid fixing. not the government, not investors, and the discos themselves seem to have a problem of, how they manage and how they go forward. Where is the missing link, and where should people look at to invest their money if they have some money to play with?
Okay, so two things that are very clear. One thing is this: listening to Mrs. Vehijan was extremely, and for me, refreshing. Refreshing because Olu came to that place to talk to us and also to hear us. More often than not, you never hear government people listening.
Right.
But she was able to talk. I still personally think she didn't win the Band A argument, in my opinion. But she had a perfect example where she said that the question is, where do you invest? Or where do you start to solve the problem? Do you try and get the cash first? Which was the reason I'm thinking behind the Band A. If we can increase the revenue, then what it means is that we can also attract some investment. Because don't forget, investment will always chase capital. There's no two ways about it. So why have people stayed back? Because there was a subsidy amount. And they kept on saying, okay, if I put $1 million in this, how and when do I get it out? I don't think there was clarity. I think now there is more clarity now than there was before. She also talked about the metering, the presidential metering initiative. And there's something brilliant she talked about there when she said that, look, because I asked her that vendor, look, are we going to make these meters here? And she said, look, what we're going to do is that we're going to bulk meter so that if 50,000, 60,000 people are bringing in meters, then what it is that we're trying to make sure they play on that. People are still going to move from their band in terms of unit cost. In fairness, what I thought could have happened was maybe we all moved from a 65 naira or 68 naira to maybe 120, 130 across board. But don't forget, it still meant that the Gencos and the Discos still had to find a way of ensuring that people are paying for what they receive. You cannot be paying for darkness and then that'll be on the increase. So, backstory, just to add to your question on investment, I think there's a lot of space for investment in the metering. I think there's a lot of space also in renewables.
Yes.
Because it has to be a mix of everything now.
Incredible. Renewables is where we now try to wrap this up because a quick example, I was at my barber's yesterday and he just lamented how the whole situation is. And then I remember he talked about the fact that there were these small solar pieces that used to be 6,000 naira some months ago or years ago that have now gone to 25,000 naira. So the point is renewables for a small family, if you want to fix solar, it is upwards of 1 million now because, exchange rates and everything else has impacted prices. What's happening in renewables and how can the regular man, maximize? This is a space where you're working and we're seeing progress in maximizing solar and everything. But what's happening in that space and how can the common man, get some of that benefits?
Okay, first thing I'll say, Mr. Gboyega, when it comes to power, everybody is common because everybody doesn't have it.
Oh, really?
Now, when it comes to pricing, yes, that's the reality. Now, when it comes to pricing, you make a very good point. Now, cost of batteries went up at a certain time because of exchange rates. Cost of inverters went up at the factor of instrument. Sadly, we don't make these inverters here. We don't make these lights here. You find out that when we started at the company, one of the companies I work with, Ayuna, we were very, very clear about the need to try and make this product here. But what stopped us? Backward integration is not happening enough. So if I need pet coke, if I need lithium, I have to go and import those things. And then the best thing we'll do is do completely knockdown part. Two things need to happen for Nigeria. There's a lot of money going into financing purchase of these things, which is a positive step. But they have to be done at developmental levels, not 30% to repay. You have to have developmental finance that attacks things beyond lower than 10% so that people can pay over 3 years, people can pay over 4 years, but at an amount that is not prohibitive. The second thing is that I think something has started in Nasarawa around lithium batteries. There's a company called Oxano as well. They're doing completely knockdown for their panels. So the more we can do and begin to make in that renewable space here in Nigeria locally, it will take us away from exchange rates, number one. It will take us away from excessive freights coming in from China or wherever it is, as the case may be. What that now means is that you find out that it's able to come to a unit cost that is affordable. More people begin to buy and pay back over low return rates in terms of interest rates. Those things need to happen because the potential is enormous. We haven't scratched the surface. You see, REA tries to do things along the local government. You talked about your barber. So it means that what we have is to be able to tailor financing to what the barber who is in the informal sector makes on a daily basis. So do we have recharge cards where the same way he's recharging his phone is the same way he's recharging his power. So that way the money is coming. And I believe some companies are already starting that. Yes. But we need so much more. We've been in darkness for too long.
Incredible. Let's go back to petroleum, because there's news now that crude discovery in Southern Africa and Namibia, and we're seeing already some kind of movement of investment from this side to that side. Are we taking too long? I'm back to the PIA now, because it feels like if the market is not totally free and we're still having, even though the presidential directives, the executive orders are in the lines of making the markets better, should we bring in all our efforts, whether it's socialist, whether it's capitalist, whether it's free market, whether it's quote unquote draconian, whatever we have to do, or can we go full free market all the way, whatever happens based on our petroleum market?
I doubt any country, and I say this with all sense of correct me if I'm wrong, but I doubt if any country doesn't intervene in some particular sectors to stimulate growth. That's not the problem. I think the problem is that we are not as intentional as a nation as we need to be. So this is the point. If capital will always change investment, it will mean that Southern Africa, for instance, there's some oil finds. Namibia. Look at Guyana as well. It means that companies will take investment where they can return their capital
quickly.
That's number one. If you look at Nigeria's crude assay, we have one of the best crude anywhere in the world. So it means to make it attractive, it won't take me 2-3 years to sign a contract. So look at it this way. If I can get my contracting cycle within 6 months back again to the executive order 40, it means that capital will keep coming even though there are options, because the crude oil assay is better. And if I know that I can run my transactions within a 12 months, 24 months and get my cash back, that builds investor confidence. It doesn't stop the fact that every other person is finding crude. That's not the point. The point is that I must enable people to see buying crude from Nigeria as a positive on my balance sheet, as a positive in terms of my inflows and cash, and then as a sustainable business model. If we don't get that right, and companies, institutions like PBEC, the Presidential Enabling Business Company, or something like that, I can't remember the full money, I'm sorry, council. They need to sit down and look at it that, look, within these agencies of government, how does the man from China, from Europe, from Qatar, come into Nigeria and want to invest in this sector? What are those 3 key points? Return on capital, timelines to transit my $1, and then at the same time, I must be able to exit this amount of money when it's due me. I think Mr. Cardoso has tried on that, but it has to be sustainable. Between himself and Mr. Awaleto, they need to find a way of making this sustainable. Once you build that confidence, the capital will not go anywhere else.
Great. Finally,
that's my opinion.
Finally, before I let you go, Mr. Jide Pratt, it's been amazing. But pray tell we get things right. Let's just imagine a world where all the policies and all the wishes that we want in our energy sector works. How good is the future looking? And because petroleum connects to other industries, how well are we going to fare when everything we wish comes to pass, for instance?
You know, the country Nigeria can reset itself. And I always say this a lot. They say we have complex problems. That's fine. But if everything comes to bear, a president needs 4 good years. Because take it from me, 4 years of consistency is more than enough to take advantage of the market that we already have. We're just not intentional. That for me is so. That way you find out petrochemicals, like you rightly said, oil and gas ties everything in. The Dangote refinery is one massive ad. Don't forget there are 2 other. I think the Boa refinery is coming on stream. They are modular refineries. Crude oil Port Harcourt, Kaduna. Crude oil getting to 2 million barrels has to be an intentional achievement. Because with that, you can also feed the modular refineries. You can feed the big refineries. So that region by region, you solve those immediate supply gap problems. petrochemicals become something the Dangote refinery will bring to bear. LPG. 4 years, Mr. Gboyega, and I think that we're on the right track to becoming the global leader that we should be.
All the best to all
That's
of us.
my opinion.
Jide
Amen
Pratt,
twice.
Energy Consultant and Chief Operating Officer, Adeoya, Nigeria, Country Manager, Trade Grid. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on Dynasty.
Thank you for talking to me, Mr. Gboyega.
All right, listener, you can call me now, 091-5598-9999. I'll take a few calls and get your contribution and get your perspectives on this matter this morning. You can call me and engage us on the program this morning if you have any contributions regarding Nigeria's petroleum industry and what's going on so far and how we can get out of here. 091-5598-9999. Hello, good morning. Good morning to you. You can speak up. What's your name?
Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Okay, the same problem I had on Daybreak Review because of network or connections. 091-5598-9999. If you can try to call back in a few minutes before we take this away and then get ready for 9 o'clock. 091-5598-9999. That's the number that you can call this morning on Dynasty 89.9 FM. Hello, good morning. Okay, that's gone. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Regards to the petroleum, my contribution is that why is our NYSC, the NYSC, our youth corps should be posted to the all these filling stations? Because the schools are already dilapidated and petroleum, there is nothing to learn in class again. People are now going for driving schools. So our NYSC should be posted to petroleum stations, and this will facilitate more production and ease our movement in the country.
Oh,
good morning.
You didn't tell me your name, but thank you for your contribution. I do believe that NYSC core members are already being posted to petroleum companies. I don't know about filling stations. We then start to look at the conversation as to are they needed at the retail end of filling station. But I believe that core members get posted to energy companies. Hello, good morning. Hello, if you're there, you can speak up. Okay, try to call back 091-5598-9999. That's the number that you can call before we close this off this morning on Daybreak Dynasty, the dialogue. Hello, good morning. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
Hello.
Yes, good morning. Go ahead. What's your name? Okay, maybe you called the wrong number. Anyway, thank you all for being a part of the program this morning. Thank you for listening. We really, really do appreciate you. Yes, we'll be back tomorrow for the dialogue, but at 9 o'clock there will be Lawe Lawe Kukunu Werui. Let's enjoy some news in Yoruba for that time. That's about it. My name is Gboyega Adeoya. I'll see you on the flip side.